And every league, every sports league, baseball, football, basketball, hockey, you have two conferences. You usually have the East and the West, the American League, the National League, the AFC and the NFC. And there always seems to be one team on the other side that kind of mimics you, right? To me, for the longest time, I always thought the Chargers were like Falcons West. Like they had a Phillip Rivers. They were constantly competitive. They'd make the playoffs. They'd fall short. Obviously, they didn't get to the Super Bowl, but there was a lot of similarities, and they would blow games like you'd never see a team blow games in the NFL, and it was just constant heartbreak. I always thought the Chargers mimicked the Falcons. Right now, in the NBA, the Suns and the Hawks kind of mimic each other. The Suns in 2021 go all the way to the finals. They fall short to the Bucks. Obviously, we know the Hawks went to the Eastern Conference Finals, fall short to that same Milwaukee Bucks team in 6 games. And ever since then, despite the Suns making some big moves, acquiring Kevin Durant and things like that, and, the Hawks, they didn't necessarily make the big moves, but they did acquire DeJounte Murray. They've just constantly gotten worse. And you saw the Hawks get bounced embarrassingly against the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs. Well, the Suns got equally as embarrassed by the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they've fallen so far out of real favor in the West. They're not even really considered championship contenders. Now, maybe they could make some savvy small moves, but they're in a tough spot. They don't have any money. They don't have any draft picks. Bradley Beal, nobody wants them. A lot of people think the Suns are going to blow things up and potentially dangle Kevin Durant out there and try to see if they can make something work. Now, they don't want to rebuild. They have Devin Booker. They have Bradley Beal. They don't want to rebuild. The Hawks don't want to rebuild because they don't have their picks. Same with the Suns. They don't have their picks. So there's this scenario where if Kevin Durant gets traded out there, they're going to want superstars in return. Well, there's some possibilities there for the Hawks. Obviously, Trae Young for Kevin Durant could intrigue them. DeJounte Murray, Jalen Johnson, and a package around that very well could intrigue them because the fits in both areas clearly are not working. And it's not to say any of these players are bad. We know Kevin Durant's an all-time great. Trae Young is one of the best point guards in the NBA. DeJounte Murray's an all-star caliber player. Jalen Johnson's a rising star. The fits are not fitting.
Yeah, and, you could say whatever you want about the Suns being better, but like in terms of expectations, both of these clubs, I think is what you're saying, are well below expectations. The Suns might have higher expectations, but they're both drastically underperforming.
Nowhere close to a championship.
Nowhere close. And I think, the Suns need a point guard. It became very clear that they need a true point guard. And what do the Hawks have? A surplus of all-star point guards, whether that's Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. Obviously, if I'm a Hawks fan, I am a Hawks fan, I prefer to keep Trae Young at all costs. He's the better player. Now, you can argue fit, defense, whatever. I want the better player, pure and simple. That's how I operate. I think that if you're the Hawks, and a Kevin Durant trade does come up, you pretty much got to do whatever it takes to kind of shake this up, kind of going back to what we were talking about last segment where like something has to change. You got to show some guts. You got to do something that, is going to be risky, risk it to get the biscuit. Nothing worth having was ever easy. So I think, if you're the Atlanta Hawks and something comes across your desk where it's KD's Suns, you kind of have to give them whatever they want. And if you do somehow convince them, I think DeJounte Murray would be a perfect fit with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Obviously it wouldn't just be DeJounte Murray for Kevin Durant. You'd have to throw in, several wings, Jalen Johnson, maybe Bogey. I don't know. You'd be stripping your roster, but that's still, you're reducing salary. So now you can spend that elsewhere. And now you have a true match on the court. And whether that is Trae Young and Kevin Durant or DeJounte Murray and Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I think DeJounte.
And one more thing. I just want to say from Kevin Durant's point of view, I think it could be interesting in terms of like a team where you finally, we all know about the Kevin Durant, cloud that hangs over his head. Couldn't do it in Oklahoma City, goes to Golden State. Now everybody considers those championship asterisks. They're not his championships per se. Couldn't get it done in Brooklyn. Can't get it done in Phoenix. And Atlanta, he would have ownership, so to speak. These if somehow he could bring a championship to Atlanta, that would be on him. That would be his championship. I think that's got to be interesting.
I don't think there's any. And listen, Trae Young and Kevin Durant have a relationship. Yeah. We saw him play with a similar player in Steph Curry. That's kind of the relationship between Trae Young and Steph Curry. We can talk about that for days, but a similar player. And we saw the success that those two had. What do the Hawks need more than anything? A wing. What do they need? A point guard. And I think DeJounte Murray and Jalen Johnson. Listen, Jalen Johnson is up and coming star. An up and coming potential all-star. That's a really good building block for any organization. It's a great building block for the Hawks. I don't want to give up Jalen Johnson. Now, if it's for Kevin Durant, that's a different story. But DeJounte Murray, obviously already at that all-star level, also a younger player. So not only are you getting better if you're the Suns with those two players, you're getting younger. And Devin Booker is just entering the prime of his career. He's got tons of basketball left. Bradley Beal's a younger player, didn't have a great year. Maybe that changes with DeJounte Murray and you get Kevin Durant out of there, but he's a younger player. He's got plenty of time left in his career. Kevin Durant, as good as he is an older player. He probably only has 3 or 4 years left. And the timelines for both teams kind of match up if you trade a Jalen Johnson and a DeJounte Murray, because listen, Kevin Durant and Trae Young's contracts run simultaneously. If it doesn't work with those two, maybe it is time to blow it up and enter a complete rebuild, and you trade them at the end of their contracts and get all those picks when you have those picks again. And then for the Suns, you have a younger team that you can build around and cultivate around, and maybe Bradley Beal has a bigger deal and you can make another deal next offseason. But I think the timelines make sense. I think the biggest hurdle to get over is the fact that the Suns are going to have to sell to their fan base that they are going to be trading Kevin Durant, an all-time great, which is never easy to do. But if you bring in two really high-quality players and say, hey, we're still going for it, it's much easier. And it'll be probably more than just Jalen and DeJounte. But I think that's a very good starting point. I think that's enough to pique the interest of any team. For any players that are out there that are considering being traded, any team, like, you got to be interested in DeJounte and Jalen. I mean, those are two guys with all-star caliber futures, right in front of them.
Yeah, and I might be saying his name wrong. Matt Ashiba, the Suns owner, that's a huge factor in all of this. He came in swinging his hammer. I'm going to do this, this, and this. Gets these, all these 3 superstars, paying the luxury tax. He's going to have to swallow a pill of being like, I failed. I need to maybe take a step back and let the basketball ops people do the basketball ops things. And I think on the flip side of that, in terms of the owner conversation, if you're the wrestlers and you kind of approve this trade, everything's got to be approved with the Atlanta Hawks. We know that. Then you're going to have to kind of stomach those big contracts and then potentially going into the luxury tax to surround them with complementary pieces. Because if you do get Kevin Durant, you're going to gut your roster of any complimentary piece you have. That's just going to be the price of doing business for Kevin Durant.
They don't even really have that many.
Bogey, Jalen Johnson, DeJounte Murray,
but
and
outside
a bunch of picks. Onyeka Okongwu.
I don't imagine it'll be a bunch of picks. I don't think you're going to have to throw in that much, but maybe you have to throw in
it's Kevin Durant.
Yeah, but it's Kevin Durant at 35, 36 years old.
I get it. I understand. He's still a superstar. He's going to
That's fine. There's things that I don't think the asking price. You're talking about two. You're talking about a young up and coming all-star in Jalen Johnson and a current all-star, and you're trading both of them. I don't think it's going to take way more than that. Now, if it does take way more than that, then maybe you start having the conversations about Trae Young, because you do have to think about putting a competent roster together. I also don't know how the cap would work. I mean, if you wanted to include DeAndre Hunter in there, like, would they even be able to afford it? I mean, that's another $22 million a year player. So it's interesting. I think, though, if the Suns seriously consider blowing this up, which it looks like they have a good potential, Kevin Durant's the guy that makes the most sense to trade. He's gonna have no shortage of suitors, and he's gonna be able to get an all-star or two in return. And I think Jalen Johnson and DeJounte Murray are very intriguing fits for them.
Both of these franchises are sort of at a crossroads where it's like, clearly we can't run it back with what we just had, but neither want to kind of go into a rebuild. Both want to compete for championships. So the fit in terms of on paper for a trade partners, it seems so perfect. Of course, it won't happen because it seems so perfect, but I'm really intrigued.
It's the Hawks, because I can't believe Kevin Durant would probably raise hell about coming to Atlanta, and they'd be like, we want to do but right by you. And that's such a big deal in the NBA, and we can never have any good things because we're the Atlanta Hawks. So that's really why I think it won't happen, but it would be fun to have